Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first STS Congenital Database upgrade webinar. Today is Tuesday, February the 2nd, 2022. Happy Tuesday. Sorry. All right. So for the agenda today, I'm going to cover the welcome and introductions. We're going to have a little deep breathing meditation before we get started. Then we'll do Dr. Subramanian will provide us with a 6.22 upgrade overview. Then we're going to turn things over to Carol, and she can update us on the adults with congenital heart disease. We'll review the review of the data collection form. Then we'll turn things over to Chastity and Melinda for a little bit of training manual plan, and then we'll end things with your questions. Just a few housekeeping things to go over before we get started. Just to let you all know who is on the call today, we have from STS, we have myself, Carol Cron, we have Addie Dolan, Emily Conrad, and from our surgeon leader side, we have Dr. Meyer and Dr. Subramanian. From the core group, we have Chastity, we have Leslie, and I think, is Janet on this call? I thought I saw Janet on here, but so we have Chastity and Leslie, and then also joining us today is Melinda Offer, and she is our adult cardiac consultant. So Melinda is going to be helping us and guiding us through and assisting us with some of these adult cardiac variables that were brought over. So just a little bit of background on Melinda. She has been the adult cardiac consultant for 3 years, going on 3 years now. And prior to assuming the consultant role, she was a member of the core group for a little over 10 years. So Melinda knows her stuff, and she is going to be backing us up and helping us on the adult cardiac side of things. So welcome to Melinda. Thank you for joining. From the IQVIA team, let's see, we've got Joe, Melanie, Michelle, and I don't think I've forgotten anyone else. And so thank you everyone for joining today. And again, before we get started, so just a little bit about how these webinars are going to work, the upgrade webinars. So as you'll see, and later on in the presentation, Carol is going to go over a timeline of each of these calls and topics that are going to be covered. So with that in mind, each of these webinar calls are going to be focused on a certain section of the data collection form. So we would like to ask you to please keep your questions focused on the topics for today. We're not going to answer any questions that are not related to this upgrade, this particular section that we're doing. Again, so we can get through these webinars and keep them focused on the topics that we're covering for each webinar. At the end of the webinar series, we will have a session that will be open for you all to answer any and all questions that maybe didn't get answered, or questions that may have arisen after we've gone over a certain section. Again, you will have the opportunity to ask those questions. We want your feedback, and we want to make sure we address things in the training manual ahead of time. So just to clear any confusion, just cut that off beforehand. So again, for your questions today, please submit those via the Q&A. And again, please keep those focused on the topics that we're covering today. We'll get to as many questions as possible. If we cover all of our questions that are related today, we have a little bit of time left, then we'll entertain some additional questions. But again, keep those questions focused to today's topics. I think that's all that I have. So next, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Subramanian.
Oh, Leanne.
Yes.
Sorry, 1 second. Let's have everybody, if we, for
yes.
the DCFs.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. So late yesterday, the data collection forms were posted out on the STS website. If you have not had the chance to download those, so just take some deep breaths. Let's go ahead, deep breaths in, deep breaths out. Go ahead over to the STS website, to the data collection form page, and you'll see 2 data collection forms there, one with changes from 341 to 622, and then you'll also see a draft 622 data collection form. Please keep in mind these are drafts. I do not encourage you to print these out, as there are a lot of pages. After today's webinar, we made a good point. I'm actually going to post Word versions of these forms so you can take notes. But as of right now, we just have those PDF versions, but I will work with marketing to get Word versions posted for our next webinar. So, and Carol also did put a link in the chat box for the DCFs. So the link is there. So deep breaths in, deep breaths out, just pull those forms up and then we'll go ahead and get started.
All right. Hi, everyone. Just to rub it all into Carol, it's 72 and sunny in Southern California, Carol. Love you too.
Not right.
Yeah, I know. Well, welcome everybody.
Have nice weather.
Thank you. Look, for all the amazing work you data managers do, the least I can do is to share our weather with you. So I extend the invitation for all of you to come to Southern California or go to the Bahamas and work as remote data managers, because again, I don't say this often enough, but really we think about this every minute, and that is you data managers are the life and soul of our entire database. Without your dedication, perseverance, and your attention to detail, the data collection form in the database will not be what it is today. So thank you very much for doing this. And many of you heard me talk about this in the AQO as well, but as you know, the data collection form undergoes a periodic review process to upgrade the fields that we're collecting. This process for the current CHSD data collection form upgrade started in fall of 2019 and extended all the way through to summer of 2021. The way we do this is we put together a set of upgrade subcommittee, if you may. This started with the leadership of Dr. Meyer, who ran the database at that time. And we divided the entire data collection form into pre, intra, and postoperative variables. A core group of surgeons, select cardiologists, anesthesiologists, but most importantly, representatives from you data managers formed this upgrade subcommittee. We met every week and we tried to come up with a data collection form upgrade that met the criteria that you're seeing in the fourth bullet point. The idea is to keep the collecting variables still relevant. What does relevant mean? It means if we're doing newer procedures today, if we're doing more complicated procedures, if procedures or diagnoses require greater granularity, we introduce those. We get rid of data that either are difficult to collect or don't contribute to the risk model or to PI or QI processes. Because again, I want to say this very clearly, the database and the STS in general is extremely conscious of the data collection burden that comes with the DCF. We review every single variable to see why we're collecting it, what the data are, why should we do it, all of those things. We look through it very, very closely and carefully. And then we review, based on our audit results, the accuracy of the data that are collected and the degree of missingness. Based on all of these, we introduce and eliminate a whole set of variables. An important voice in this process is the voice of you all, the user group, the core group, the questions you raise, the issues you bring up to us, allow us to clarify the fields, add fields, or delete fields as we see necessary. So you're going to get a flavor for all of those. A lot of redundant fields that you don't like are going away. So yes, I will take, I will take fruit baskets from you. So a lot of those bad fields are going away. But what is coming in, I'm really excited about, are two important fields. One is a set of fields for adult congenital. I'm not going to elaborate on this because Dr. Meyer is going to talk to you more specifically about the adult congenital fields and why we're doing what we're doing. But the other set of fields we've introduced are fetal interventions. Again, this tells us that the data collection form in the database is nimble and we're able to pivot to what turns out to be newer procedures that we're doing. Currently, cardiac surgeons are involved in fetal interventions. You will only be collecting those data for patients who undergo fetal interventions by your pediatric cardiac surgeons. We're not doing interventional data collection. It's only for the surgeons. This means the data collection form needs some specific changes, such as you don't have a birth date. Until today, if you didn't have a birth date, you would not be able to submit the case. Carol and Chastity are going to go through and tell you how we have modified that to allow a set of fetal interventions to be introduced. And we're in the process of trying to see if the fetal interventions can be linked to a completely new form that comes when the patient is coming for their postnatal intervention. Again, more to come on these topics, but just to emphasize my excitement, And hopefully you will all agree that this is the direction we in the database and in the field should be going. After having done all this, Carol, Leanne, Chastity, all of them, Leslie, they've spent many, many, many hours with our IQVIA team to come up with a data collection form that you see uploaded into the website. We're going to do the beta testing with our core group, and it'll finally come back to the task force in early fall of it'll come back to the task force in potentially late summer of 2022. The fields were already approved in 2021. The task force will look at it one more time, and our go live plan is for the summer of 2022. So I'm really excited. I thank you for everything you're doing. We're all here for your questions. I will stop with that and turn it back to Carol.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're happy to be able to do this all with you. So your leadership has been very appreciated. I'm going to hand it over now to another wonderful leader for our database, Dr. John Meyer, who's going to talk a little bit about the adults with congenital heart disease and what the intentions were, why it's so important, and just a nice overview for us. So, Dr. Meyer.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. So the rationale for this is sort of highlighted in yellow, and I think everyone should understand we just didn't make this up out of whole cloth. The demographics are now that there are more patients alive who were born with congenital heart disease and who are now 18 years of age or older than there are under 18. And that, intuitively makes some sense because, you have a lot more years to live after you're 18 than you do between birth date to 18. So it's an important demographic, that we have to be aware of. The other important part of this is that, we're still learning about the patients who are, if you will, longer term survivors of a congenital heart operation. And I will put in a plug here again for every one of you on the call to be trying to capture 1 year follow-up date. We now have a capability of doing that. The response rate has not been particularly high, but I think like everything we've always introduced in the database historically, it takes a little while to get traction and uptake. But this notion about these adults with congenital heart disease is really guided, I think, at least, or influenced by, some of our own experience. And I would cite in particular, I'm old enough to have started when we were doing atrial level repairs for transposition. And now, obviously, that's pretty uncommon, at least for simple or detransposition. And the reason is we started having, seeing what happened to those patients when they hit their teens and 20s and 30s, from the time of introduction. So we have to keep our eye on these patients for a prolonged period of time so that we understand, what the late problems are, and then try to figure out ways to make those patients better. So it is really critical, I think, that we capture in a reproducible fashion the information that we need. And having participated with Dr. Subramanian on the all of these calls where we literally went through the data collection form line by line and tried to figure out how we were going to incorporate the adult congenital patients, capturing some of the variables that are captured in the usual adult data collection form, but tailoring that so that it works for the kinds of questions that we're interested in as congenital heart surgeons. That's how we got to this place where we are. So I think the slides provide some of the detail here. And we have this sort of unique, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but in some sense, we're still learning about all of the late outcomes in congenital heart patients. And I think, this superimposition potentially of acquired heart disease on top of congenital heart disease is really, going to be something we're going to have to learn about. And the databases are a great learning tool, or one of our great learning tools. So I'll stop there. If anyone has any questions for us, either myself or Dr. Subramanian, we're happy to entertain them. But I do think everyone should understand, I hope, at least the rationale for why we're embarking in this new direction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Meyer, so much for your insightful words and guidance on this. It was a labor of love from our surgeons for sure, working through this process. A couple other items I'd like to add onto what you said is we will be going through all of these adult fields, and that's Melinda is on the phone with us. She's as Leanne said, she's our adult cardiac clinical consultant. Her and I will be working through education on these, and we know it was a big addition, but we're going to get into how to read the form in just a little bit, and hopefully we eliminated as much double data capture as possible. It wasn't always possible, but we'll talk through that. And I think the most important thing that the task force, and I don't want to speak for you all, but I think what the most important thing is that we really want to be able to risk adjust for these patients and look at compare apples to apples when we're looking at outcomes and quality improvement, and focus on reducing risk for patients once the surgeons learn more about this population. So it's very important that we start collecting this data, and hopefully we do a good job at it. So, okay, now I guess it's my turn to go through. I'm just going to give a quick update on the timeline of the educational webinars, data spec update, and then we're going to talk about the data collection form. Does anybody need more time? If you do, put it in the question box, please. Anybody need more time to open up those data collection forms? If so, now's the time to do it. So if you haven't yet, please go ahead and do that. And we'll talk about, we changed some of the methods for which we're collecting variables. So we'll go through that. And then we're going to talk about the adult only fields and a few of the congenital only fields that are within the form and how we kind of marked them out. And then our plans for upcoming data collection forms. So first, I want to talk about the timeline for the congenital upgrade webinars. These topics are tentative. We are trying to do them weekly in where you see a gap, like between February 8th and February 22nd. That's because I think on February 15th, we have our monthly webinars. So we will still have our monthly webinars. We will not be having user group calls during this process, just because we have so many other webinars for these upgrades that we need to get through. So here's kind of the outline of what we plan. You'll see that June 7th is going to be hopefully, as long as we stick to this plan, or hopefully it works out that it does. June 7th will be set aside for additional question and answer time. If we aren't able to use June 7th for that, if we're behind a little bit, then we'll use another date prior to July 1st for just Q&A time. And there was a question about sharing the forms. I am going to share them in just a few seconds here. So the other thing I wanted to touch on before we get to the forms is the data spec upgrade. Or just Paul Meehan at IQVIA has done his checks on it. And the only item we're waiting for is the valve VAD list, which is just about complete. We had to add a couple valves in there. So that list is just about complete, and we hope to get the specs out. I'm thinking probably by mid next week, the latest, if not sooner. So that's where we're at. What else was I supposed to do? Oh, and now we can go to the data collection form. So I'm going to minimize the screen, and kind of what what works out nicely is when we pull up the two data collection forms side by side. So I'm going to open, these were the two forms that are posted. The one on the left is the version 3.41, and you'll see that we have fields that are highlighted in yellow. This is highlighted in yellow and green. And then on the form on the right is going to be what will be the new data collection form for 6.22. So we'll kind of walk through these together. And sometimes it gets a little difficult when you do a share screen like this, but hopefully everybody can see these. Okay, if you're having any problems seeing the screen or it's too small, let me know and I can try to enlarge it a little bit, but not much. So the form on the left that's posted are things where you'll see yellow, and we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of it. This is really going to be about how to read the forms and give you maybe a week, a time to go through and check it out. And this is just the high level overview of reading the forms. So the form on the left, like I said, it's the version 3.41 form. It has the removed fields or moved fields. So you'll see things as you scroll through, you'll see things highlighted in yellow that are, the text is crossed off. These are fields that we removed. This is a draft form, so it is likely that not everything was captured. We will be updating, if there's errors on these forms, we'll be updating them periodically and putting a date on the STS website when the last update was made. You'll see things that are green. We tried to utilize multiple select instead of having individual yes or no's, which will help alleviate, instead of having 8 check boxes, 8 things you need to check, you'll only need to check the things where it applies. So if pregnancy related complications, for example, there was gestational diabetes, but none of these other things, then you would only pick gestational diabetes from the list. And I'll show you what that looks like to the form on the right when we get there in a second. So that's pretty much how the form on the left is going to read. If we moved things within sections, you'll also see it highlighted from one section to another section. You'll also see it highlighted in green. An example of that is blood products. So I just want to show you an easy way to search the form is to go to the edit and find. And I'm just going to search down to blood and see if I can find that quickly for you. Let's see. Here we go. So this is the blood and blood related products. We moved a bunch of this information down to the anesthesia section. So we will be collecting, for example, we'll be collecting transfusion of non-autologous blood in the operative section for every patient. The more specific information is moved down to the anesthesia section. So if you participate in anesthesia, that's where you would collect this more specific information. So that's how to read that form. Now on the left, and this form I'm going to make a little bit bigger because there's quite a bit here, and I want to make sure you all can see it okay. We have the key at the top, and please take a moment to get familiar with this key because it's going to help you as you work through the data collection form. Things that are highlighted in blue are going to be new fields, or it might even be that we just changed the text a little bit. I think before this said, here, let me pull it up on the other screen.
That one was just abbreviated.
I think it was PAT.
Yes, patient NAT.
Yeah, so let's pull it up on the other screen and you can see here what we did. So before it said patient NAT ID SSN, we just changed it to read patient national ID SSN. So no major changes to that field. It's not a completely new field. It's just that we made a little bit of update. When you get down to fields like this, where you see permanent street address highlighted in blue, it's a brand new field. you'll notice that the hidden text, this annotated text, is in green. That too has a meaning. And this is going to be more for probably not going to impact you at the site level so much. It's going to be more for helping the vendors, and then also helping Chastity and Melinda Chastity with Melinda's help as they're going through adding in the adult fields to the training manual to know where to pull. They don't need to come up with a whole new definition or intent clarification. We can pull the one from adult cardiac and then review it to make sure it's still relevant to the congenital population, which it should be. We did most of this work during the upgrade calls already. So you'll see things that are highlighted in green. The green has the same meaning. It's a moved field from, for example, the blood field were moved from the operative section into the anesthesia section. You'll see things with light. You'll see things with light red background. Is my audio okay?
I can hear you fine. I think
Okay.
it may be on her. Yeah, I haven't gotten any other, no one
Okay.
noticed had issues.
You'll see things with light red background, which is just going to be a congenital specific field. Now, what that means, and purple background will be an adult specific field. These fields are going to play off of the patient's age. So when patients are under 18, then these fields with the light red background will open. It's apparent to those fields. These light red fields will only be available for that population. The purple fields, the adult specific fields, those fields are only going to open for patients who are 18 years or over. So even though you see them all on this form and you see a ton of fields, and we have a 94-page data collection form, it's really not going to be that long once you separate what's specific to adult and what's specific to the congenital populations. We're going to talk more about that. And I also want to mention, as the vendors start getting certified, and once we get feedback from the vendors and we ensure that everything is moving okay, that all the spec builds are going okay as planned, and we're not hearing issues, we will release a couple forms of this data collection form. One form will be specific only to the congenital population. One form will be specific to the adult population. So that might help you in your data collection if you're doing the entry right into the vendor software, to have these forms printed as you're going through, so you know what fields to expect to populate according to the patient's age. The other thing we added in are things like this double star or double plus sign. These indicate risk model variables. The congenital population the congenital database has risk models in place now for their cases. When the surgeons were and the task force were going through and adding in variables for the adult population, they were strategic in that they know that they're building risk models for the adult with congenital population. So we wanted to make sure that we maintained the current variables that were in the adult database. So this really doesn't have this part here really doesn't have too much of an impact on you, besides it's just more knowledge, but not really actionable or anything you need to worry about. Red annotated text, which is this text here. This indicates that this field has been in congenital. This is called hidden text. You'll only see it on the annotated form. And it includes the short name to the field and then the sequence number. The green annotated text, like this one here, this is related to adult fields. And then orange annotated text is adult fields where a change was made to either the harvest codes, the options that are available to choose from, or a definitional change from adult to this now being collected in congenital. So as we go through the data collection form, this is just to give you a high level overview of how to read the keys. As we go through on these upcoming calls and we talk about each of these fields, I'll be pointing things out like, oh, this is, this field has been in congenital. We're collecting patient last name here in accordance with your local rules. If you submit last name, then this is where you would enter it. Last name, of course, is PHI, so we do not require it in the database. but we really like to have it. The other item, there was a question about the blood product anesthesia section. That's correct. So blood products will not be, we'll collect high level information on blood products in the operative section, but we will not be the granular volumes and things like that unless you are participating in the anesthesia. So, okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is you'll see like this italicized text in gray. This is just going to be more information for you. There's really not anything to do besides this is just meant to provide some guidance. And you'll see here, like we added in, this is medical record number. And as Dr. Subramanian talked about, we are going to be collecting information for fetal interventions. Well, as we know, fetuses do not have their own medical record number. They are often associated with their with their mother's MRN. So what we would like entered in this spot for fetal interventions, and this will be explained in more detail in the training manual, but is entering the mother's MRN followed by the word fetal. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fetal. And that way we can identify that this was a fetal procedure. And there's other ways to do that. And we'll get into that. We'll get into that as we work down the form on the call next week. I wanted to talk a little bit about these multiple select fields. So if we go into race, you'll see here, race previously was all yes, no, and you had to answer, yes or no for the 6 different options that were available. We've gone to multi-select for that, so you only need to pick the options that apply. So if you have a patient who is white and Black, you would just click both of these instead of having to answer yes, no, no, yes, no, no, as it was in 3.41. So that should save a couple clicks for you. So that's how the multiple select fields work. If you are doing analysis at your site and you have your own database that you're working with, we did get some questions in the other upgrades about, well, how do I now pull this out and how do I map it? We can talk more about that. If you have questions about it, we can talk about that towards the end, but essentially these will be delineated fields that are separated by commas in your software, in your vendor software, and can be analyzed just by matching the harvest codes that are now going to be available for race multi versus these individual short names that were previously used. So the other thing I think we were going to talk about is the adult specific fields. And let me just see if I can quickly scroll down. It's a very long form. Okay. And I scrolled too quickly. So this is the pre-op factor section. We're going to talk more in detail about this, but I just want to show you an example of what these adult fields will look like. This hypertext here is just for information only. There's nothing for you to do. It's just as we're building out the training manual, we need this information so we know how to provide the intent clarifications in the training manual to align with what was captured in congenital previously, or and what's captured in adult. So if your patient is 18 or over, and we're going to look at that by age days, if your patient is 18 or over, then these options here will appear for you. These options in purple will appear for you. If your patient is not 18 or older, is not over 18 or 18 or over, sorry, you will not see these choices. You will not see hypertension. You will not see liver disease. You will not see any of these with the purple background. You're only going to see the ones that have the clear background here, which are available for everybody. We did add in some parent-child relationships, and we'll talk about that as we work through this section. And you could see some of these are only going to be available for patients who are over 18. Others will be available for everybody. And then the congenital only fields, there's not very many of those. I think we had them, actually they're up here. You'll see them. I think that these were the only 3 preoperative complete AV block in the pre-op section, and then these 2 strokes are only going to be available for under 18 patients, patients under the age of 18. The reason we did this is because we collected a little bit differently for the adult patients. And I'll show you what that looks like. Preoperative complete AV block. We actually capture this in addition to other information for the over 18 population. So instead of asking, does the patient have complete AV block for the adult population, we're going to ask, is there a cardiac dysrhythmia? So if your patient's over 18, you'll see cardiac dysrhythmia. You will not see complete AV block. And if you answer yes to cardiac dysrhythmia, you will get this list of questions down here regarding what type of arrhythmia. And if it was AFib, then the type of AFib and the timing of AFib related to surgery, things like that. So that's how to read the form. And I think I covered everything. Leanne, can you think of anything else that I need to cover? Just a general introduction to the data collection form.
You've done a very good job. That key is just that key, learn that. That's going to be a huge amount of help to you and helping you understand and read through it. So I think you've done a great job. I can't think of anything else, Carol.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And okay, on that point, so the next webinar we have is going to be on February 8th. We're going to work through administrative through hospitalization on that webinar. So that will mean we'll just talk through sections A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So we're going to work through those sections on the next call, and then we'll take questions for those sections at that time. And as Leanne said, we really want to keep these calls focused. So we want to keep the questions focused to what we're talking about for the day. And then, so we're going to prioritize those questions as they come into the Q&A question box. And then if we have time, we'll get to other questions, but really want to at least keep the questions focused to the upgrade process. And then Nancy, so I'm just going to take Nancy's question before we go over to hand it over to Chastity. She's asking how many additional fields or total fields for the database for under 18, over 18, and the anesthesia portion. So Nancy, we still need to, we're still finalizing everything. And although this data specs are built and we're just updating the valve VAD list, I don't have that information right now, but we can certainly provide it in an upcoming call. All right, Chastity, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. This has been very informative thus far, Carol. So I appreciate everybody's time and work on this. So the training manual, as you know, we have a plan to roll out a new training manual. And as a part of that, it'll be specific to version 6.22. So we don't want you to go back to, version 3.41's training manual or 3.22 or anything prior to 6.22, as this will be the training manual for the specs that will be released for version 6.22. And this will all be laid out in the training manual. The look and the feel of training manual is going to be a little bit different, but I want to back up and talk about how we're going to roll out the new training manual. So once the specs are finalized next week, then I'll be handed essentially the blank training manual. So it will just have the 6.22 specs in it. I will then work with the core group as well as Melinda and Carol on the adult fields to go through all of the previously submitted FAQs. And we're going to then build those into either the definitions or the intent clarification of the fields themselves. So a little bit different than I think what's been done in the past with congenital, but it's worked well in the other databases. And so we'll be able to, I'll go through each section and say, okay, we have all of these questions as it pertains to this specific preoperative factor. So we clearly need to roll these all into some intent and clarification. We'll go section by section very systematically to make sure we haven't left anything out. This is also where I will incorporate, I know many of you have sent emails in about suggestions and things that could read better. And so we'll definitely take all of that into account as we develop this new training manual. And so I'll rely heavily, on the core group and such for this information. So as a reminder, when the training manual comes out, we will no longer post each submitted question. You're still going to ask your questions as you do through the FAQ portal, through the STS website. You're still going to submit your questions that way. However, the way you're going to see it hit the training manual will be under the intent and clarification for each of those fields. So if you were to submit a question about a complication for readmission, let's say, and it's something that requires, some intent and clarification update, that's where we're going to put it, is right under that specific complication. And we'll say, oh, as of, August 1st, here is the update to this, or some clarification to this definition. And so that's where you'll see that. You'll no longer see all of the posted questions, as many of the questions are very perhaps pertinent to your individual program or a specific patient scenario, and not necessarily going to answer a question for another program. That being said, we're going to also put out a summary document. You can go over to the adult database now and see a very nice summary document that Melinda puts out each month. And she goes through and says, here are the fields in February that are, oh, thank you for doing this, Carol.
You're welcome.
Right, we'll take care of a live demo right now, but you can go to this summary document and you can see what fields had an intent or clarification made last month. And so right here, you can see each field where a clarification was made with the date there. So update in February of 2022. Here are the clarifications made. So this will all be contained within a summary document. As you notice, it's a rolling summary document. So you won't have 12 documents posted for the year. It'll be rolling where, I start with the first month out and then, build on it from there. That way you don't have to any longer for congenital go to the training manual and try to look for what's in red or what's been updated by, January 2022 and search the document that way. You'll be able to go and update or go and look at this document and see anywhere where an update or a clarification was made. And it'll list the update and clarification there. And you can also then go and find it in the training manual. So I'm hoping that this will be a very helpful tool. I think it's been helpful on the adult side. And so hopefully we'll get some great feedback about this, and so that you can see the updates as they are occurring. So Melinda, do you have anything that you want to add?
I think you did a great job. I think I'm a little nervous about this, but I think that you and I will work through this just great. And I'll try to be as helpful as I can. Congenital's new for me, but I'll entertain adult questions and help you as much as I can.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, great job, Chastity. And I think you and Melinda are going to make the A team jealous. So,
we will be the dynamic duo.
yeah, so I'm really looking forward to you all and watching the genius at work. And I think it's going to be great. So thank you, and thanks, Melinda, for helping out on this side of the STS databases. I greatly appreciate it. I think we do have a couple questions that we can probably take that are going to be helpful. So Jennifer's asking, will you please remind me what cases version 6.22 applies to? Is it those cases from 7/1/22 forward? So we don't need to go back through the 4-year harvest period and update all the cases according to the new version. Yeah, so that's correct, Jennifer. The update will take place, planned to go live July 1st, 2022, and that will start with OR dates of January 1st. I'm sorry, July 1st, 2022. Ignore that word January, it slipped in there. So that you're right on that one. So it's going forward, you don't need to go back and update anything for the upgrade. Next question is from Patricia. She's asking, are there ways to automate more data with our JDAT team, short of changing vendors that pull the data over from one surgery to the next? So we are going to provide some information to the vendors about that. There are a few table changes that are happening, which is going to make pulling data over difficult, but we're going to work with the vendors to explain that process and kind of what the ask and expectations, hopeful expectations are with that. And we'll be reaching out to the vendors. I know Owen is on the call. We'll be reaching out to the vendors after the data specs are sent to set up a call and go through it with them and ask answer any questions that they have, to help them with the build process to make it as painless as possible for them. So we want to be helpful on all fronts of the upgrade, because we realize how big it is and what kind of ask it is to get this done and out by July. So, and then the last question is from Elizabeth. As far as the functionality of the DCF in the vendor software, once you enter the date of birth, will the appropriate fields open? And if less than 18 years old, the adult fields will gray out? Yes, that is correct. So we were able, in this version, it's the first time in any of the STS national databases that we were able to put 2 parents in place. So there are 2 parents in place for the adult only fields, or for the harvest codes that are only specific to the congenital population. So the patient has to be 18 or over, and whatever the other criteria may be for that adult field to open. So you will not see those fields on the congenital under 18 population. You will only see them on the 18 and over population. So we were happy that that worked out, because we were a little nervous about that, but it worked out. Diane's asking, will STS provide guidance and provide a list of adult procedures diagnoses that will be considered congenital to be entered into the congenital registry as well as the adult registry? Sites seem to come up with their own criteria of what is an adult congenital case and which registry is to enter the case. So we have had, that's a great question, Diane. It's actually something that needs to be covered. Dr. Subramanian, I don't know if you're available. Did you want to just talk a little bit kind of what our plan is for this and what our expectations are regarding the adults with congenital at the go live of the version?
Yeah, Carol, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a great question. Let me quickly share where the thought process is right now. You are absolutely correct. Different people interpret what is adult congenital very differently. In addition, there are practice site differences as well. There are certain children's hospitals, freestanding children's hospitals, that can operate on adults of any age. And there are other freestanding children's hospitals, such as mine, where we cannot operate on adults of other ages. There are some adult hospitals that do adult congenital operations, but otherwise don't even participate in the congenital heart surgery database. So there are multiple permutations and combinations here, Diane. Here is how I think we in the database task force want to approach these fields. We're going to leave it up to the site for now. If you as a site have been entering patients who are adults having surgery into the congenital heart surgery database, great. Continue to do that, please. Except that now you will have a different set of adult congenital specific fields showing up for you in the database. That's how it's going to be. We recognize that there are going to be adult congenital operations done that may not be entered into our database. And we recognize that the definition of whether it's going to go into the adult database or congenital database is going to be different between centers. But this is the starting point. Over the next few months, Dr. Nelson, Jennifer Nelson, who's the head of our adult congenital heart surgery workforce, is conducting a survey, and we're going to get survey results on what surgeons in general think constitutes an adult congenital operation. As we get more clarity from the survey, and as we get more clarity from these new data fields that we're going to collect starting July 2022, hopefully the adult database and the congenital database will be able to work together and come up with more specific recommendations. We will definitely do that. We have that in mind. We recognize that's a variability, but we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. So right now, we just want to put these fields out there in the data collection form, let you do them and go with it. Now, a couple other things that I want to answer in that regard. The adult fields are a lot, particularly for those of you that have not participated in collecting data for the adult cardiac surgery database. Some of these fields are going to be very, very new for you. We recognize that. We totally recognize that. For those of you that already shared duties to do adult cardiac surgery database coding, this will be a breeze because we basically harmonized the fields between the congenital and the adult database and brought them all together. So the adult fields are high. You will get used to them. Here is the good news. What we have found is that the number of patients over 18 years of age whose data are currently being entered into the congenital heart surgery database is very, very small. So at a database level, we anticipate that the additional data burden won't be uniformly high, but for some of you, it's definitely going to be higher than the others because you tend to do a lot more adult congenital. At this point in time, Becky, we are not instituting a percentage missing cutoff for the adult congenital. The percentage missingness cutoff for being included into the risk model continues to currently only be reliant on the database discharge mortality field. We're not going to say, oh my God, if you don't have these adult fields, you're not going to be included in the analysis. We're not going there, but like we've always done, we encourage the data managers to put in as much information as you can. And equally importantly, please let us know what data are difficult to get, and then we'll reevaluate if we need to continue to collect those data or not. So in summary, I'm excited about the adult congenital fields. I recognize the additional data burden. My current position is that it's hopefully not going to be overwhelming, but we're ready to pivot and flex as required. Carol, back to you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Yeah, and we're going to work with you, Becky, as much information as we can provide to help you feel comfortable extracting the data. There are a lot of fields that were added, but we're going to walk through those, and we have Melinda and Chastity always available to help with questions. So we don't want you to, as Dr. Subramanian said, we really encourage complete data submission because that's what's going to help us build risk models for this population, which are very important. So the more complete the data, the better. And if there's issues with it, you have to let us know if you're having difficulty finding something or understanding something that is in the training manual. Let us know so we can correct it, and that we understand for a future upgrade where we might need to make adjustments in how we're collecting things. That's how we know. That's how we know we need to fix things when people give us feedback like that. So, and I too am very excited about this. I think it's going to be wonderful, and it's been a labor of love for many people. So, any other questions, comments? Okay, Leanne, Chastity, Melinda, IQVIA, anybody?
I do not have anything to add. Great job today, Carol. You're a phenomenal teacher, and we're lucky to have you and Melinda and Chastity and Dr. Subramanian and all of our surgeon leaders, Dr. Jacobs, Dr. Meyer. Thank you all for everything that you do. We could not do this without you. As Carol said, this has been a labor of love for a lot of people. I can't even begin to tell you how many hours have been put into this. So just know that, this was a thoughtful process, an extremely thoughtful process, sometimes painful process. But we encourage your feedback. And as Carol said, please let us know what's working, what's not working, so we can learn from this and just make this the best database that it can be. So again, thank you guys for your patience and everything. And we're looking forward to this upgrade to see what we can do.
And I have a goodbye song. Hold on, I have to find it.
This is Melinda. I just wanted to add a comment, especially to Becky, who feels overwhelmed by the adult fields. I'll be here for you. I know it's overwhelming. It was actually when we added all the aorta fields into the adult database several years ago, it was extremely overwhelming for the adult abstractors. So I totally get that you're feeling overwhelmed, but we've worked through the aorta for years now, and I feel confident that I'll be there for you. I'll help you.
That's why we have you, Melinda. Thank you. It's true. Melinda will have your back. Okay. Thank you, Melinda. Those were very kind words. Let's see. Anything else? Any further comments? Heidi wishes they were started at the beginning of the year instead of the middle. We wish too. It was supposed to start January 1st, but and we can't put it off any longer. We have to go with it this time, and hopefully we will aim for January 1 starts going forward. But I definitely understand that. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining. We will have our call next week. And Leanne, did you want to take Rachel's question? We have a few minutes left.
Yeah, so the stat scores have been the new appendix, I guess the appendix C has been finalized. That has been finalized and will be posted to the STS website and will be going to vendors. This new stat scores will be implemented in the spring 2022 analysis. And IQVIA is working to get these new stat scores into the primary procedure mismatch report. We'll have some more information on that in our monthly webinar, so stay tuned. But the new stat scores, Appendix C, has been finalized, and I will be getting that posted.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thanks,
rest of the day.